ensayar rápido, no sabes con el pie. Ensayar rápido, no sabes con el pie.
Welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. We're coming to you from live. This is streaming live, unless you're watching an archived edition of it, from Big Hat Books at 6510 Cornell Avenue in Indianapolis. It's in the Broad Ripple section of Indianapolis. Big Hat Books has an excellent selection of books, space to rent for special occasions, pretty neat stuff. We are here on a special edition of Civil Discourse Now because Paul Ogden usually is my co-host on the show, but Paul is a panel member because we're discussing methods of judicial selection, how you choose judges, and we've got a special focus today on Marion County Superior Courts and the selection of judges there. And Paul is a candidate, as are our two guests, Mark King and Greg Bose. Greg and Mark are both Democrats, so they're running in the primary on May 8th. Paul's a Republican, so he's running in the primary for that party on May 8th. We were talking about the way in which the party slates candidates. Candidates, if they want to get nominated by the party and be slated, first of all, they have to pay a big chunk of change in order to be slated. What I heard was, I think I saw quoted in the press as $12,000.
It's a Republican. So
I think it's around $13,000 for the Democrats.
And for that, you get no guarantee that you're going to get nominated by the party.
Correct. Nominated by the party, slated by the party.
Slated by the party. Right. You're right. That's a good point, correcting my terminology. Where does that money go?
As far as we understand, some of the money, if you are slated, and will go back to you to help run your small campaign. The remainder stays with the actual party, so the chairman controls those funds.
I don't think the money would be given to a candidates committee, but I think the candidate would benefit from the this pooled slating money because the party does send out a batch of mailings to its voters to say, here's our recommended slate of candidates for all the offices. So a particular one candidate may be sharing his money with someone outside his race completely. Like they may have a really hotly contested state House of Representatives race that they need the money for.
But they'll send out the little cards that say like whatever the party is, this team, and a lot of folks will come to the polls with those cards because
especially older voters.
Well, and one criticism of non-merit selection, we can get into that later. One criticism of election of judges is that to really have good elections, you have to have an informed electorate. And when you have, like in this race, you have 20 vacancies potentially, or 20 seats for which people are running, people aren't going to know about all of the candidates for that many seats, and so they won't have the information, they won't be informed. And so the party functions in such a way as to make that information, kind of make that decision for them.
And that may be some of the problem because of a lot of the people that are slated are really, and I hate to use this word, handpicked by the chairman of the particular party. As we talked about earlier, because the precinct committeemen are mostly chosen by the chairman then functions to say who shall be a judge in Marion County. And by that, they've taken out all the decision-making process from the actual election.
And I am asking this question in all candor. Is either one of the party chairs for the Republican and the Democratic Party a lawyer?
I know that the Democratic Party chair is not.
I don't believe Kyle Walker is a Republican. I know it's a Republican. Not an attorney, I don't believe.
And I know that a lot of there is sentiment that lawyers shouldn't have exclusive domain over selection of judges, and that figures into merit selection. because there will be non-lawyers who
or elected, where the people who are registered to vote, most of those are not lawyers.
Oh, I know that. But when you get down to someone's making a determination in essence saying, well, we're going to give our imprimatur to this person, and that person has no legal background, it's solely political, then that goes to an argument that people make that somehow the office of judge is not a political office, that it's above politics. And I think that goes into the nature of what a judge is. Could each of you, Mark, you led off last time, and so Greg, you lead off this time. Okay. What are the qualities that you think a judge should possess?
Well, let me start off by saying that one of the cool things about having an organized society is that we don't use our fists or knives or guns, for the most part.
Unless you're in mixed martial arts.
Right, to settle our differences. That we have an organized way to present our disputes, go to somebody else who will help us hopefully find a fair resolution of the dispute. And that's, in our case, through the judicial process most of the time. And so, in order to have that, where people respect the outcome and thereby continue to behave properly so that they don't get called before a judge later, we need judges who are going to look at the case fairly, who are going to listen to all the information, who are going to know what our laws are that we've all agreed to as a society through our legislatures and through our constitutions, and try to apply a consistent set of rules to each dispute. So you need somebody who's willing to listen, you need somebody who knows the law, and you need someone with an open mind, because none of these cases are alike. And, after you do so many cases as a lawyer, you recognize that no two set of circumstances is the same. So if you were to sit as a judge and say, oh, this looks just like those last 20 cases I heard, then you're missing half the information. So open mind, be fair, listen to people, know the law.
Paul?
I have many of the same ones that Greg has. I made a list. Temperament, willingness to listen, open mind, independence. And I added one, ability to interpret, or knowledge about how to interpret the law. I see so many judges who don't know the knowledge, have knowledge. For example, a typical rule of construction is that a newer law prevails over an older one when it's conflicting. Specific controls over general. Just general rules like that I learned at the Court of Appeals that I see too many of our trial judges that don't seem to know or follow.
Mark?
I agree with both of what Greg and Paul have said. One of the things I would probably add is a judge needs to know when they can't do the job, when they need to step aside and let someone else decide that for a particular case. We all have biases in life. We all have different temperaments of different things. And there are some things a judge should not decide on. And they need to know when to recuse themselves and to step aside. But I find that a lot of times, the fact that they're a judge of a particular court makes them want to continue in that case, whether or not they really should. So I think it's when to get out.
I was reading a number of articles. I was reading articles in preparation for today's show over the last couple of months because I've been looking forward to this topic. I read one article on merit selection. We're going to get to that in a minute. But they canvassed people who had been on merit selection commissions, and the most important quality that they identified in screening judicial candidates was mental health. And when you think about it, it's the mental health of a judge. That's a fairly important consideration in having somebody on the bench. So we have a method, and let's go ahead and get to that, in terms of, one thing before that. When you look at expenditures and campaigns, that can have a bearing, and that's been happening recently, especially on retention votes on judges. There's been a lot of money dumped into election campaigns the last few years in judicial elections that hadn't been before.
Mark, you might explain the merit system a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about...
Well, and I was going to get to that. So,
Okay.
you're jumping out of your job again. You are in contempt. I'll find you later.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. Merit selection is... Greg or Mark? Who wants to...
I'll take one, Mark can do the other. Election or merit?
Describe merit selection.
A merit selection is when there's an independent board, if I'm correct, that decides, who looks at judicial candidates and decides based on an independent system. Some counties and states elect the merit board themselves, and they then help choose judges, and sometimes they're appointed by the governor, and sometimes they're different ways. But like in Indiana, we have, for Supreme Court, we have sort of a merit system in place. People apply before this board, they kind of review, and they make a selection of 2 to 3, and they send it to the governor, and the governor then decides who shall be appointed. So a merit system is supposedly an independent way of just electing judges.
We have, and there are a couple of counties that have merit systems. I mean, because we have like 7 or 8 different methods of selection of judges in the state of Indiana. It's then for example, in the situation of the governor of the state of Indiana and the Indiana Supreme Court, because we've had 3 justices retire just recently. The Judicial Commission interviews applicants. I think when Justice Bowen retired, there were 34 applicants. The commission interviewed each one of those 34. They sent in resumes. They were posted online. Then they cut that down to 15, and then they got the final 3. They submit the final 3 to the governor, and the governor picks from those final 3. Other states have different systems, but the emphases are on experience. The candidates for the office don't have to worry about raising funds. And that brings in a question of conflict.
Emphasis is on experience.
Experience and knowledge.
I thought it was mental health.
I might have to quibble with that.
Like I say, because if we look at who's been selected in the Supreme Court,
It's as political. It can be as political. It's politics behind closed doors.
Yes. I mean, you're still
There's a whole lot to say about that. And maybe I could talk about election and sort of put the counterbalance to it a little bit. Your basic form of election, you would think, is that any candidate who's qualified to be a judge in Indiana, I think you have to be a licensed attorney in almost every court that you run for across the state. There might be some town courts or city courts that still don't have it. All right, but at any rate, if you're qualified, you can put your name on the ballot, and then the voters will choose. And then we twist that up a little bit in Marion County because the primary election is much more important than the general election, and maybe that's not the case in other counties. And it wouldn't be the case, for example, in Marion County there's a circuit court judge where there's only one judge. So that usually is a general election contest. Each party would put up a candidate and they would fight the other party's candidate in November. One more thing about election though. Even in Indiana's merit selection system for the appellate and Supreme Court judges, there's a retention process that says within like 2 or 3 years they have to be submitted to the voters on an up or down vote. No competitor, but just do you want to keep them or not? And then every 10 years after that. So there's some input from the public on that score.
We're at the end of this segment. We'll be back in a minute for our last